Welcome back to the If I Knew You Better podcast. I'm Brendan Davis. I'm your host. I've been your host now for 2.5 years on this show. And I am very pleased to bring you this really special episode. You may be listening on audio, or you may be watching this video right now, in which case you wonder why I'm referencing audio only, but it exists as just a podcast on If I Knew You Better. I'm cross-posting this to my original podcast, Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, also, so you can listen to this show there. And this is a very special show for many reasons. The ultimate reasons will be revealed in what we call the third act in the storytelling business. But in the meantime, it's special because I'm joined by one of my best friends, one of my favorite memories of living in China, my friendship with my buddy Kevin Geiger. Hey Kevin, how you doing, man?
Hey, how you doing, Brendan? Good to see you again, buddy.
Thanks, man. It's good to see you. And I'm here in LA. You're in Taipei. And it's a lovely day. And I wasn't trying to do a Jesse Jackson and make that rhyme, but tip a hat to the master. Today's show, as I said, it's going to be revealed kind of in the third act of why this is particularly a special one. But I'm going to tell you this much up front. This is a little bit different in a lot of ways besides just having the video component today. It is different in that it's going to be a lasting record in a way of a lot of things that we've previously covered. Kevin has been a guest, a frequent guest. He was an interview subject on Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, and then we fell into a routine of doing what we call the Fretful Laowai. Laowai is like, a slang term for foreigner in China, and sometimes has negative connotations, etc. But it's also used with love and friendship among people. It's not considered an insult, but people can say it with that attitude if they want, of course. But just like any word. But we've been doing this thing we call the Fretful Laowai Radio Hour, and we always have our we add something to it to indicate which one is different, what's different about each one. And this one is this is a little bit of a preview of the third act news. This one's called Fretful Laowai Endgame. And Act 1 will focus on reckoning. So specifically the theme of reckoning, and kind of my top line on that we're going to talk about is the COVID-19 math and aftermath. But we're going to talk about it related to personal and professional issues and such. The second act of the show, we're going to talk about orientation. That theme relates to where, why, and how are we, meaning right now in the reality. So reckoning's about looking at what's past and recent history and coming to terms with where we are. Orientation is really understanding everything else about right now and where we are and what it means and where we want to go. And that leads us inevitably to the third act. So in storytelling, beginning, middle, end, to summarize it, our third act, that theme is transformation. And my top line on that is stasis equals death, which I'm paraphrasing, or actually I'm quoting somebody that it's been repeated a lot. Someone coined that once upon a time, and I don't know who to credit that to. But stasis, or staying static, staying still, not growing, I mean, you just define death if that's your reality. So that's when I'll tell you all the things that we're teasing a little bit. There's more to it than maybe you even think just from that little heads up. But Kevin, I'm being super serious, man. Help me out. We've got to have a conversation. We've got to talk about your life. What's the latest from Taipei and Kevin Geiger world?
Well, if we want to alleviate seriousness, I don't know if reckoning is the place to start, but we'll try to make it as light as possible. Find some humorous anecdotes if we can.
Yeah, it's also the name of one of my favorite early REM albums. That was actually part of what popped in my head. So.
Mine too. I've spoken about this on previous podcasts about the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Everybody's been impacted by this, of course, globally. But the impact to my family specifically when, like in Gilligan's Island fashion, a 3-week Chinese New Year visit to in-laws in Taipei turned into this 6-month and counting odyssey.
Yeah.
And the reckoning for us was really the switch that flipped in May or so when I realized, okay, I think I'm living here now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I think I'm no longer stranded here. I think we're living here. And that had ramifications in terms of choices that I would make for our family, for my profession, etc. But psychologically, that was a big moment for me. And for those who don't know, which may be many people, there is a ban on foreigners returning to mainland China. I'm a foreigner. And for that matter, there's a ban on foreigners coming into Taiwan. So I'm in here, I can stay.
Right.
But if I leave, I can't get back in. And many countries have these bans. Some countries are loosening them up. They have different forms of restriction. The EU now apparently is putting a ban on Americans coming in.
Yeah.
But the point for us was that we couldn't get back into mainland China and even to get our stuff. So in terms of that decision that, okay, I think we're living in Taipei now, we've been operating out of a suitcase for months and slowly acquiring new stuff. Once the kids were in school, Emma, who's 2, and Claire, who's 5, were in school, that was really when that switch flipped. It was like, okay, the kids are in school. I guess now the lives are here. So that was important for me, that psychological switch, in terms of just the indecision going away about what to do next.
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers, but the indecision was gone. Like, should I try to get back into mainland China and continue operating there where I've been for 12 years, or should I move on? And this was something that my wife, Wen, and I, who are both in the entertainment industry, specifically in animation, had been debating since 2015 when we left Disney China and went independent again. It's like, should we stay in mainland China? Should we go to Taiwan or some other place, back to the US?
Right.
And so the virus was kind of the tipping point in a way for pushing us out of our indecision into a vector of action and, I guess you might say, orientation.
Cool. Yeah, I relate to that a lot. And as you know, because we've talked about this, for me, it's been reckoning with just everything that's happened. And, I'm totally sick of telling my escape from China story, and that makes it sound more dramatic than it is. It was dramatic enough. And when that's one of those things when somebody would ask and I would tell them with me giving just the plainest, no embellishment, just Reader's Digest summary version. If anybody, that's how old I am. That no one knows that reference. Basically, the Netflix description, the Netflix description of it. It's people go, wow, But for me, I'm out. I'm safe. I didn't bring the virus here. Don't blame me. But I've been back in the States since late January. But I faced that thing where another season of rent was due in my Beijing home office, workplace. And basically I had to have, between St. Susie, my girlfriend, who has her own place, but fortunately, but between her and my friend Peter Walters, amazing screenwriter and one of my oldest friends related to China. We were friends in LA before I ever went to China. And he had like an Ayi and a Shifu, which means like a housekeeper type and then a driver, helper, worker type. He had some people they worked with, he and his wife have used for 10 years for moves and such. And for a fraction of what we thought it would take, basically, Susie planned with Peter's help and got those people involved. And they were out of there in I think it was 4 hours from walking in the door. She had done some preliminary stuff the night before. She went over ahead and kind of got some certain things situated and threw out some trash and this and that. But basically it's all in storage now at Peter's place, because they have a huge place with it. And they have a 3rd bedroom that all their friends kind of have a corner or a section and they've got their stuff and they're lucky to have a lot of rooms. It was very nice of them. But, so, cool. I'm out of Beijing. I live in LA now. Again, and I love LA. It's not even a love-hate thing. I hear people say that, and that's fine if that's somebody's experience.
I miss
their experience. Yeah, but at the same time, there's the news. Again, reckoning, right? That's our theme for this act. Well, the news yesterday that LA County, of the people tested, the positive rate, it's 9.78% in LA County. So close to 10% of those tested are positive for COVID-19.
Oh, man. And this is a place that's been taking it reasonably seriously as well.
Pretty much, but at least that's sort of been that's been the rule of the day. That's been the plan and been what's encouraged, and people like me sort of gently coaxing. I try to avoid shame because that's a destructive thing, and who the hell am I, to throw that on somebody? But I've been trying to gently coax
Yeah.
basically you
Set a good
you know,
example.
yeah, you idiots. We'll try to keep this PG-13 because this is also going to end up on YouTube.
I'm not beyond
yanked.
shaming people at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah. But so all these things for me, it's like, okay, it's one thing, kind of having to evacuate, the delays to work projects and such, which I'll talk a little about that at the end of the
Sure.
thing. But the adjustments and all that. But my girlfriend's back there.
Yeah, that's tough.
Nobody could travel if we wanted to because of the
Right.
geopolitical excitement between our two countries, and other reasons, and health. I mean, nobody's trying to make anybody sick, so we're all staying
Right.
put on purpose, and plus she has a job. So
Well, even just to jump in for a second, even within mainland China, with the Health Kit app that has the color coding for
Right.
if you're green or yellow, or I was just talking to a mutual friend of ours before this podcast about how she's cautious about going around to different places because she doesn't want that color to go from green to something that restricts her from having mobility. Ironically, then you end up kind of self-editing your mobility.
Yeah.
But even if you were in China, mainland China, with your friends, you may not be able to go and just pop over and see them the way you used to. Used to do.
I've had a slight, I've had brief moments. Mostly it's like homesick, missing my girlfriend stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's been my home for 4 years, and that's where my girlfriend is. Again,
Sure.
Luckily, we didn't displace her. She's got her own place. She's fine.
Yeah.
The reality is that I haven't had any. There's no actual regrets. There were a few points where, basically as I saw it going really, really south here.
Yeah.
Which again, let's not bore people. Kevin and I both get the Nostradamus Award for 2020 about how horribly Trump has managed to screw this up. It's exceeded our wildest dreams of how bad it could be. It's that bad.
When you said on one
bad.
of your social media feeds, you said nobody could have seen this coming. You're like, everybody saw, well, not everybody,
literally
but many
almost
people
everybody.
Saw this
except all the World Health officials and people who follow this professionally for their careers and have other than everybody credible, no one saw this coming.
But we were definitely on the cusp of it. This isn't a pat on the back, but we just happened to be right at the epicenter, so to speak, of this breaking, and we took it seriously.
Totally. And so the thing I was kind of driving to there was to say that, I don't want to sort of rehash all of that, but
sure.
But there's, so all this reckoning is like my own COVID fatigue. There was never really a real time where I could have gone back, but the thing I was sort of saying before that was that being in touch with the friends back in Beijing, specifically in China in general, on WeChat friends groups and such, the restrictions became so onerous about movement and this and that. Again, that was required for the virus stuff, but then we talked beforehand. Most people don't have a kind of a China connection like we do. That's not what the show's about today. And moving forward, that's less of my identity than it's been the last 10 years. So that's a little, again, a bit of a third act preview to say that. But so I don't want to get into the weeds on this aspect.
We're bridging away from it.
But what I'm trying to say is that, I understood that I was better off here. Because if I'd stayed there, it's just gotten very difficult for foreigners there, not unlike the way that there's been some xenophobic racism stuff here. There's been a lot of that in China, honestly, and the restrictions and rules. So that's off the table. So coming to terms with that, that's the reckoning thing. And then, again, there's the personal life stuff. And fortunately, video chat is now, we've got endless options to video chat with people, so that's how I'm able to stay.
But you're still not with them.
Sure, thanks for underlining that. But yes, my point is that
that wasn't meant to be cruel. It was meant to be empathetic.
No. I appreciate that. I'm just saying my point is yes, and my point is that at least video chat allows you to keep some level of connection with people.
Yes, it does.
In theory,
indeed.
We're putting that to the test right now.
Well, I Skype with my parents every weekend. I've done that for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And so of course,
how's that usually going these days?
Well, it's going okay. Every now and then it goes off the rails, but that's usually my fault. Deciding to engage in some issue that I should just let go.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the logistics, I just wanted to mention, and so we can move away from the China part. you were quite fortunate, I think, in terms of like being able to, work. It's sort of like arthroscopic surgery, right? You're on one end of a Skype or a video feed, and
Oh
you're
yeah,
giving instructions
yeah,
to people about
yeah,
what to do.
yeah.
That one,
I
no,
did
not
it by
that one.
video
Okay,
chat. Yeah, Susie
exactly.
would fire up the video chat, and okay, so
Yep.
let's say like, okay, this section here,
Yes.
what's keep, what's trash. Oh, okay, great. If I had been
It's like,
there,
you're
if I had had 2 weeks, hell, a week, I could have gone. I mean, I could have given away or trashed. I mean, 3/4 of what I had.
yeah,
But unfortunately, they decided to pack it, wrap it, move it all. But it's
yeah.
still a
So we're going.
surprisingly small amount of stuff. I mean, it would fit like in a corner. It fit in a corner of a room. It looks like about let's call it like a meter and a half by meter and a half, and then like kind of to the ceiling. But it's kind of it's not that big. It's not that
Yeah.
much. Like a shipping pallet. Take that and then put stuff on it close to the ceiling of like an apartment ceiling, and that's what I got.
I wish.
Plus
I
a
really
couple
wish
of
we could.
chairs.
I wish we could say the same. Um,
Yeah, no, you've
ours
got it.
has
You
been
need a warehouse.
oh,
Jesus.
with the kids, and we were, we through a combination of photos and circling what we want and Xing out what we don't, and video, we've been culling down, but still, like the books we culled down, we still ended up packing 19 boxes of books, and people say, why pack any books at this point? But these are keepsakes, art books, things that were given to us decades ago that are signed, and just I'm not leaving them there if I can help it. But going through that process, like you're working with a deep sea diver or somebody who's on the moon, and you're trying to direct them around, is an interesting challenge. And what's been making it more interesting is what you referred to earlier about the restrictions that are going on, for health reasons in mainland China. So,
Right.
For example, we had a bunch of boxes delivered, and we have a friend of ours who's staying at our place and helping us pack, which is nice. But his ability to, like, we just recently had a new cluster outbreak in our neighborhood.
Yeah, you sent me photos of people lining up to be tested. It looked like the lines
tested,
here,
police are out,
only more people.
And then again on deliveries and people accessing the building. So now we can't have any more boxes delivered directly. Those have to be left out in front. You have to go get them. And our plan for having friends come over to gather things that we're not shipping, like we're giving away shelves and tables and plants and books that we don't want. That's all scuttled for now because people can't go in and out. So, the stuff still, we want to get the hell out of that apartment. And
when are you trying to escape? I mean, I know you happen to be paid up for quite a while.
End of July.
Oh, were you able to rework your deal to leave early and not light all the money on fire?
No, but that's part of our approach, is that we paid, like many things in China, we paid for a full year of rent.
Yeah. You get a better deal. You almost always, there's some month-to-month things for people who don't know, but you typically pay a season at a time, 3 months at a time.
Yeah.
But you can also sometimes pay like twice a year.
A full year.
Or a full year, and then you theoretically get a better deal. And Kevin's been in a nice fancy place, and maybe they make you pay the whole year up front. Do you have an option for seasons, or is
they
it
don't make us pay it? They
you get a deal by doing a year.
It was like yours, 3 months at a time was the usual, but what we ended up doing was proposing a full year in exchange for a discount, which we got, but then we paid a full year of rent. We paid a full year of Claire's tuition. We paid a lot of stuff in China you pay a full year of. And now we're trying to get as much of that back as we can. We have zero leverage now, of course.
Sure.
But one thing we're trying to do is to say, hey, look, we're going to be out. We're putting in our notice today, our 1 month notice. We're getting out at the end of July. So it's empty. It's available for you guys to re-rent, etc. And then trying to see if we can get back our final 3 months. I have no hopes, but a little hope.
But it seems like if they rented it, like they can't legally have rent from two people for the same time. Like, it seems like there'd be some catch. And this may be a little down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
For this conversation,
the biggest thing is we just need our stuff. I mean, our kids every day, they're like, where's my, they say, when are we going back to Beijing? Like Claire asks me all the time.
Yeah.
And I say, I want to know what's her motivation. Do you want to go back to Beijing? And she's like, I want my stuff. Like I want my dolls, I want my toys, I want my books. And she does miss her friends. She asks about them. Sure. But there's so much stuff, our personal items, financial records, all this kind of stuff, hard drives, computers, all back in Beijing. So we need to get that stuff out as soon as possible, irrespective of the rent issue.
Right.
So we're working on that. And the fact that you got, settled in like a half day is awesome. I mean, I wish I wish we could do that.
It was pretty special. And then she supervised. She had a power cleaning crew, which was like 5 people with like heavy equipment. I mean, it looked better than when I moved in, and it looked pretty good when I did. But
that's awesome.
Before I want to move out of reckoning, but there are a couple less things I want to kind of throw in the conversation.
Sure.
Which for me, the other big terms of reckoning, and again, this is leading up to the third act as we wrap up the first act, which is that my dad, who difficult relationship in history, he died a year ago, June 3rd. And so I'll tell you, I mean, it was a bit of a reckoning to realize that June 4th is when something snuck in my head that I thought, wait a minute, there's something significant about this. I had to look it up. And that's what I first thought it was, but it wasn't just like in my head, So that's interesting, and coming to terms with his legacy. And also I've been doing that in a way through a project that will, again, third act. But the big one, and this feeds us into the second act here in my mind, and let's see how we roll with this, is that right now there's a saying, and it's related to slavery in the American South and the repercussions. And the saying of the chickens are going to come home to roost, right?
Yep.
Like in referencing, there's a big setup to all that, but essentially referencing the problems you created once upon a time, the legacy of what you did is going to come back around. It's a karma idea. So chickens are coming home to roost in America in a way that's overdue by, a few hundred years by most rational people's reckoning. So it's dealing with this nationwide reckoning about really all marginalized groups. And personally, again, American Southerner, but, the progressive side of progressive, and been fortunate to work and know people of all shapes and sizes and colors and descriptors and everything. So I feel fortunate that the bias that I came up with in the South was never deeply rooted. It wasn't coming from my mom or anything like that. But just like the environmental stuff that was around. That, I mean, I was never a model person as a kid either, but I wasn't racist,
Who was?
But basically, like growing up and becoming, the mind expanding things that we do, reading, a lot of reading. And then some other things. But all those things that do to it, expand your consciousness or your perspective theoretically and practically, I'll tell you, practically.
Living in a different part of the world, for example?
And then, well, that's you're 40 years ahead of what I'm saying, or 30 years ahead. But I'm saying that like the foundational time in the South, growing up, and the South, I was there for the New South. I mean, I was there when, black and white folks were mostly friends and mostly digging each other's. I mean, black kids at rock shows and, white kids at rap shows, and the merger. I mean, rap rock, horrible though it was a merging of genres, and the things that were good in that, like the Aerosmith Run DMC collab of Walk This Way from things that were good and a hit. I mean, that stuff was important. So the last reckoning is the role of a middle-aged white guy like me and you in all this. And so I'm not going to throw out a bunch of preachy prescriptive BS because that's not my role or but the fact is that it leads into the second act, which is what I'm saying is called orientation. So where, why, and how are we? Now, let me just do this. I'm really curious to hear your take on this. I'm going to have a lot more to say the second act. I think this is probably a Kevin-led section, but I have a thing that I wrote in my notes. I just want to read this because this succinctly says what would take me 20 minutes to ramble through. So this is my prescription to me for orientation, how I'm working to orient myself. So make peace with the past, understand, how we got here. That's part one.
Right.
Part two is first we'll have to triage. Okay, this is what I'm saying here. We'll have to triage and see what's bleeding, what's broken, what's dying, what's dead, what's hopeful, and then what's awesome and strong that we can build on. And we'll have to figure that out about our bodies personally and the body of society and all these other things. But then we'll have to take stock of a lot of things within us and go pretty deep, and also things without ourselves, and go pretty deep and try to answer those three questions of where, why, and how are we. There's only forward in terms of human development, no going backwards to a previous reality. This is a time to re-examine. Again, these are notes to myself. I'm not trying to be like a third-rate guru.
I feel
this
you.
is notes to myself. I'm trying to be my own, self-talk here, guru. This is a time to re-examine damn near every aspect of our lives and create a new vision for ourselves, asking the journalistic questions of who, what, where, why, and when, to get a handle on where we came from, where we are now, and where we want to be in the future.
Yeah.
Wrapping up this note to self, sanity and success moving forward, to me, seems to call for periods of massive introspection, followed by ones of massive action. So, orientation. What's your take on that thought? That bubble I built over us for a little bit.
It's interesting, and I'm just thinking of something that I wasn't really planning to talk about, but it seems like it may be appropriate here, related to my own childhood and coming up. You mentioned like the New South, and people talk about racism, and they have certain preconceptions about opinions vary, of course, widely. People say, the South is more racist than the North, and other people say, oh no, there's racists everywhere, and then other people will go further and say all people are racist, or all white people are racist, or only white people are racist, or what have you. The cool thing is that this is really being discussed in a serious way now, which I think is long overdue. And the fact that people are really coming out with their opinions in a heartfelt way, whether it's expressed calmly or aggressively or whatever, I don't think matters as much as the fact that it's being expressed. And it's not just like going away like the flavor of the month. This seems like this has some traction, which I think is a good thing. And I want to mention my father. My dad grew up when he was a kid in a very racist household. My grandfather, like many people of his generation, was incredibly racist against African Americans, against Jewish people, and would routinely spout things that I won't say here, but you can imagine, right, in terms of the ills that plagued America and how they were the result of these particular people doing these particular things.
Read the grievance list.
Yeah. And my dad grew up, number one, tremendously respecting his father. Number two, thinking, gee, these people must be super horrible for dad to hate them so much. But then wondering, wow, what did they do to make him hate them so much? And then when he started investigating, my dad got very into he started researching Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. He actually was attending Malcolm X rallies, dressed in his pea coat and his knit hat, like a narc, like the only white guy there. And then, and Malcolm's talking about, I know there are people right now who want to take me out. And everybody turns and looks at my dad.
Looks at your dad. He's like,
he's like, nah, just auditing the class. But he really wanted to educate himself in terms of what was going on. And that progressed from just understanding, wow, my father's racist, my dad thinking this of his own father, to then also realizing my dad himself, so what prejudices and preconceptions did he have in his own heart and his own mind? And it got to the point where he was teaching courses in Black history and Black literature at a certain point. And he got challenged all the time by kids in the class who would say, what's a white guy doing teaching Black literature or Black history? And they would discuss that. He said, well, let's talk about that. But the cool thing is he went from he was the bridge from racism in my family, right, to when I was growing up, I grew up in an all Black neighborhood.
Okay.
Because my father, it actually didn't start out that way. It was a white flight situation where in East Cleveland, I remember my very first friend, James Sims, moved in next door, little African-American kid there at the same age. And I was out in front and it was like, hey, who are you? I'm James. I'm Kevin. Do you want to be friends? Sure. And then we were best friends, right? Awesome. That's how it works. I suddenly noticed then people over the next few years were just leaving, like other friends were leaving. Oh, how come the so-and-sos are moving away? Why are the blah, blah, blahs taking off? And my mom was like, oh, I'll tell you later when you're older. And then pretty soon the entire neighborhood was African-American, except we were the only white family left. It was white flight. As soon as my friend James's family moved in, people started bailing. They were like, no there kidding. Goes the neighborhood. Oh yeah. Geez. And so I grew up in that neighborhood. I went to predominantly African-American schools, etc. This isn't to pat myself on the back in any way, but just to acknowledge for context my background. So I understood two things. One, I understood what it means to be a fish out of water, I also understood that I was in what I guess you call the power and privilege group as a white kid, right? I mean, our family was not rich growing up at all. I realized in retrospect we were poor. Like once I got into high school and my mom went back to work because she took time off to raise us, me and my two brothers. Suddenly stuff started showing up, soda pop and new clothes. And I was like, what's going on? You know, I was like, oh, so we're not poor anymore.
Yeah, that second income, yeah.
It was like magic. It was like, oh, and we can go to this school now. But still, we were in the privileged group, right? People would not look at me walking into a store and follow me around the way they would follow around an African American or make some kind of assumptions that way. So I became aware of this and sensitive to it. I don't mean sensitive, but tried to sensitize myself to understanding why, this problem existed, what I could do or what I should do to educate myself to try to be a better person.
Yeah.
And since that time, whether it's with racial issues or religious issues or cultural issues, I've always tried, this ultimately led me to live in China, to put myself in an uncomfortable situation, to learn from that, like to live overseas, to have friends who don't look like me or act like me or think like me, and to actively pursue that as a way to, change my own orientation of how I view the world, to try to get rid of the narrow scope. And first of all, realizing how narrow it is. You think, oh, I see everything. But you're seeing very little and say, oh shit, I wasn't seeing anything, right? This is what's really going on. And then to expand that even further. So that experience, and I have to thank my parents for really encouraging this and putting us in a situation where, making us walk to school instead of driving us and dealing with just getting to school on our own and sometimes getting our butts whipped on the way there, but just figuring out how to navigate and negotiate out of those situations on our own. It's kind of brave stuff when you think about now. It's where totally. It's a little more serious sometimes for your kid's safety, but that is something that I just to wrap this up a little bit. I told you I didn't plan on talking about this, but I appreciate my parents enlightening themselves to be in a position as a base for us to then understand that there are people who don't have it as good as we do. Even if we think we've got it bad in some way, we are way ahead of everybody else. And I think globally too, this is where so many Americans, like Donald Trump being elected, I think was part of a collective pain cry in the U.S. And they picked the wrong guy. I think they got conned.
Yeah, and a lot of them, the people who were not bedrock Republicans, a lot of them have gotten that now.
Yeah, the pain cry though is real, but still,
totally.
It's the result of a limited perspective. Even if you are on the low end of the totem pole in terms of standard of living in the U.S., you still are better off than like 80% of the rest of the world.
Probably even higher.
I was trying to be conservative. But
not quibbling. I agreed.
Nobody likes to be told that somebody's got it worse. Nobody likes to be told that, look, your pain is nothing compared to so-and-so's. But the reality is, Americans generally living pretty high on the hog. And understandably, when you're being asked to kind of get off that hog or let some other people onto the hog too, you're like, wait a minute, I don't like this. I like things the way they were. And so there's a lot of that going
by default,
on. Right. So for raising my own kids, I bring this around now to my children. They're born in China. They're American citizens. They're culturally and in terms of genetics, they're half Chinese, half European. They've traveled. They don't travel now, but thank God, between the age of like 0 and up to the beginning of this year, travel like crazy. Just opening them up to being around different people, different situations. That's something that I want to continue for their point of view on the world, and I hope that this crisis that we're seeing with the virus, the sort of retrenching that everybody's engaged in politically and socially around their own little tribes, I hope that does not preclude people in the future from providing environments and experiences for their children and for their families that can continue to broaden perspective as opposed to limiting perspective.
I think that's really well said. My not having kids but having a lot of friends like you who do have kids, and they range from small like Emma to some people. I have some friends who got started right away. And have who have kids who are 30, which is wild. but
Yeah.
and have grandkids. We were 10 sometimes or something, but I definitely can't relate to that on a personal level. But more power to them if it's working for them. So for me, that's the sort of thing I think about. I mean, this orientation of where I am and who I feel like I am, and where I'm going, and where how I want to become this, whatever this next thing is. That
Yeah.
is, of course, the big part that leads into the third act of this for me. But essentially, the reason I read my little summary at the beginning of this was because those were my notes to self, and some of those were things I was already thinking about, and some of them were things that occurred to me as I was writing,
Yeah.
and went back and I wrote it as a signpost on the door, basically, to be able to know what to
Yeah.
focus and what to think about, and so a lot of introspection. And I want to move into the third act, and if there's anything that's so far in the conversation that comes up that seems relevant, of course, have at it and throw it in.
Sure.
This third act, again, I'm calling transformation, which is the process of, I feel like I keep trying to paraphrase Milan Kundera, which is, which is a sign of respect for his work. But, being versus becoming, not to get all mystical, but this idea of transformation is super relatable. Even just from a scientific materialist perspective, it's understood that emotionally, culturally, social mores, social structures, that there are all kinds of transformations that are happening. Sometimes it's not so much an issue of like, don't like, right, wrong. I mean, it is like there are things that are happening, and there's also the fact that there are a lot of things that have already happened past tense, but just everybody isn't awake to it. And including me, there's things that I'm clueless about. So I'm not coming at this from a high and mighty angle.
But you're aware of your cluelessness, which is, that's a step in the right direction. Like for any of us to be aware, to know what we don't know, or at least know that there are things we don't know, is the key towards progress.
Exactly. And my theme for this act, again, as I said, really stasis equals death. Staying still equals death. So I want to let you start again, because once I get into my bit of this, I'll be going, and it'll be a conversation, but I'll have a lot to say. So I'd like to give you the floor before I go on with it. But in terms of like you looking ahead, so like you're still reckoning, I mean, you're still dealing with things from the past, like getting out of your Beijing home and this and that. We're all dealing with parts of this. I'm still, reckoning with things. I'm still orienting myself to things. And so I mean, I'm in stage 2 right now. There are aspects of what I'm going to say here for this third act of this chat. These are kind of my 3 stages of COVID coping, sort of like Kubler-Ross has their stages of death, the 5 stages of that. But how are you thinking how are you transforming, being transformed, thinking you might want to transform moving forward in different ways, such as you want to talk about?
No, it's great. The fact that you brought up stasis equals death, and those 2 words, stasis and death, are very germane to what's been on my mind lately, what's been on my daughter Claire's mind recently. I've had discussions with her, and I can talk about that a bit.
She's like 5 going on 45.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start with death.
Sure.
Claire
has
been, like any 5-year-old, she has a lot of questions about a lot of things.
Right.
And she starts to have serious questions, and not just like, why is the sky blue? Yeah. But, what happens when we die? And, are we all going to die? When are you going to die? When am I going to die? Will I not be able to see you? When I die, how will I find you if you died first? Those sorts of things.
Right.
And some of them are quite, kind of charming in a way, but also there's a lot going on. And I think because for Claire, she knows that there's stuff going on in the world. We're trying not to freak her out, but we've been honest about, look, there's a lot of sick people right now. We're trying to make sure that you're not one of them. And so we're staying where it's safe and so forth. And that's why we can't. So she has an understanding of that, but also trying to reassure her, even sometimes telling her things that how the hell do we know? But we try to have some level of confidence in our explanation, not to pull the wool over her eyes, but just to not have her freak out. Like, oh my God, my parents are worried too. We try not to show that. But in terms of death, she started asking me questions about death. And I realized this was being motivated by two things. One, here in Taipei, my wife's grandmother, who's 95 now, is in the terminal stages of a cancer situation, and she probably doesn't have too long to go. So she's at home. She's in a hospice situation. She's right. Actually, I can look over and see her house from where I'm sitting. We're right next door practically, which is great because we've been able to go over there and spend time and be with her in a way that if we were stuck in the US or stuck in mainland China, we'd be hearing about it from afar. And this is a beloved family member. That would be really tough for Wen, right? So it's been great for the kids, but also the kids they know, okay, something's,
they're coming to terms with it in like an organic way because
Claire,
it's a process.
Claire knows that her great grandmother, is something's wrong, and she may not be around too much longer. And then also Wen's mother, who I've never met, Claire's never met, because Wen's mother died when my wife was 5.
Which is how old Claire is, of course.
Yeah, how old Claire is now. So Claire, she would see photos of Wen's mom around the house, and there's like a little shrine to her, right?
It's a little girl. It's a little 5-year-old girl. Latest picture. And
exactly. She sees it. And so it's like, she's an angel. And we explain this to her in a way that she can process. But when we tell her that, she asks when we're going to die, we can't say, we're going to live for a long time. She said, how do you know? And I said, well, we don't, because she understands that Wen's mother passed away in her 30s. And so, you can't just say, don't worry about it, we'll be around for a long, because she realizes that doesn't always work that way. And then on top of this, invariably we're watching some Disney movie where the mother is dead. Like, it's just like,
thanks, Bob.
Disney's thank you. The Disney ecosystem is just like strewn with the bodies of dead mothers, or the mother's just not even around because she's presumed dead before the story even starts.
Man.
Right?
Bambi.
Exactly.
I mean, there's nothing safe.
Because I was a Disney guy, right? I had to answer this. People say, why are there so many dead mothers? And I was expected to answer this question in conferences, etc. And I gave the answer, which is, and this is from Walt, that the ultimate symbol of comfort is the mother. And so if you want to thrust your hero or your heroine into the unknown and take away their safety net and their comfort, what do? You get rid of the mother. And this was really the reason for doing this story-wise. And it's become this stereotypical trope. People make fun of it now. Right. But this is something that doesn't help it when you're trying to tell Claire, don't worry. And she's like, well, how come the mothers always die so soon? So she's been preoccupied with this. I finally got to the point where I actually had to show her the will. I showed her my will. This might blow some people's minds, but I said, look, because she said, who's going to take care of me if you guys die? First of all, she said, well, will people know and find us? I mean, it was really like heartbreaking questions. Wow. Like I said, well, yes, we don't live on a mountain or some remote place. I said, believe me, if you're out of school for a day, we get a call from the teacher. Where's Claire? Right. So trust me, if anything happens to both mommy and daddy at the same time, somebody will know and you'll be okay. And like, well, who will take care of me? And I explained the relatives who would take care of her. And she was actually cool with that. But she said, how will they know what to do? And I said, well, all right, let me show you this. And I pulled out the will. And she said, wow, what's that? I said, this is a letter to the people who will take care of you about what to do, how to raise you, what you like, what you don't like, where your money is. And she was just like, it's so long. I said, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to consider. But this actually made her feel better. And every now and she said, do they know where it is, the letter? I said, yeah, they have a copy of the letter. So, I mean, just like she was very, very, very concerned about this. Nice. And again, as a father, it's heartbreaking. I can imagine, sweet,
but
funny,
I can only imagine.
Touching, but I'm trying to explain this to a poor kid. But what this has done is also motivate me then to take this forward, to really think about how I'm taking care of myself. Yeah. And so before I can even think about what am I going to do professionally or with my family in this crazy time, health-wise, economically, politically, the one thing that you have some control over, and you've been a remarkable example of this, is your own body, right? Your own health, transforming yourself into the healthiest form of yourself you can possibly be. There's no guarantee of anything, but getting yourself in shape to be there for yourself, to be on your game, on your A game for yourself, and to be there for your family as much as you can be. And so I had a health scare recently, a heart scare.
Yeah, talk about that. Such as
I'm
you
54.
want to.
I talk about it fully. I'll send you a photo of me on the EKG treadmill.
Well, you already put a lot on Facebook. So
I already put that on Facebook.
It's already available. The swimsuit calendar doesn't look like it used to.
No,
we're a little too woke. No offense, buddy. But
I woke up. Speaking of woke, I woke up in the middle of the night.
Bring back the ladies.
Yes, exactly.
He has a topless photo with his like machine strapped on him, measuring all kinds of things.
Yes, yeah. Well, we can throw that in or point. Anyway, I think people can imagine. It's so hard to get out of your head once you've seen it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 weeks ago, I woke up at like 3 a.m. With chest pain.
Yeah.
And not pain, discomfort, but it was like tightness in the chest, and then it was kind of radiating down the left arm, and I was like, okay, I don't want to overreact, but I am 54, and this is kind of unusual, and so I got up and I was just walking around and trying to and then it wasn't going away, and I started to feel lightheaded. I started sweating a little bit. I thought, okay, am I feeling this way because I'm starting to panic that this is something big, or is this related to what is or is not going on? Yeah.
Is it something big?
And like a responsible / irresponsible knucklehead, I looked at my daughter, Claire, who was sleeping there. I looked at my wife and Emma, who are sleeping. I thought, I really don't want to disturb them, and have them take me to the emergency room. So I just went back to bed.
Okay. All right.
I just went back to bed. I lay down and I thought, okay, let's just see what happens. And, if this gets worse or not. It's kind of like when the earthquake happens, right? And the house is shaking a little bit more. Like, okay, should I get into a doorway? Should I get under something?
Yeah, you're like, it's probably pass in 10 seconds. Right. And if it passes, then you feel like an idiot. If you're like, oh my God, we're all going to die.
Right. I don't want to panic.
You want to wait these things out for a moment sometimes. But anyway, that's not medical advice.
I have gone to the emergency room in the middle of the night for different things in the past, either by myself or with Wen. But when you've got kids, it's a different equation, especially hospitals now. Here, even in Taipei, which has things under control. You'll see pictures of people not wearing masks, and people in the like, "What's going on? Nobody's wearing a mask." It's like, well, there's 0 cases here right now.
Yeah.
And because people wore masks before, now we can, not. But when you go into a hospital or a public building, you put them on. Right. And hospitals are still hotbeds of diseases in general, right? So you don't want to drag your kids in there.
They always are.
If you can help it. But I woke up the next morning alive.
Yes.
I was like, I'm still here.
Yeah, it's good.
But I was feeling weird, just still not feeling right.
Yeah.
So still like a knucklehead, made breakfast, took the kids to school, went with Wen to get lunch. And then during lunch, I was like, you know what? I hadn't even told her yet what happened. I mentioned what happened the night before and how I was still feeling kind of weird. And her face, she was like,
why didn't you tell me? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
She was like, let's go to the emergency room and get you checked out. And luckily, the best hospital in Taiwan is right around the corner.
That's good.
National Taiwan University Hospital.
No kidding.
And went to the emergency room, immediately put into a wheelchair. I was telling them I'm in the wheelchair, right? And I'm being wheeled around. They did an EKG. They did a blood test for enzymes to see if there's been any damage to heart muscle, etc. Long story short, perhaps too late for that. Everything tested normal. Awesome. My sitting EKG is normal, blood test normal, all of that normal. And they said, okay, what do you want to do? I said, what do you mean, what do I want to do? What should I do?
I want to party, dude. I'm alive. Let's celebrate.
They said, we could recommend more tests, but of course you can test yourself to death, no pun intended. And I said, how about we just do the treadmill EKG, which they did recommend, where you're active and they get your heart rate up.
Yeah, that was your glamour shot that I was referring to.
That was my glamour shot. I did that yesterday. So there was a week in between those initial tests. And they gave me a little round of aspirin, right? Just like a 1 a day. Okay. But also I have a cool vial of nitroglycerin.
Oh,
they say it will not explode, but it's an explosive, even though it's in small quantities in this, people, these are normal pills that people, I actually found out after posting a little bit about this on Facebook, how many of my friends and family have had either heart attacks outright or heart related events.
Really?
And so many who are carrying the night.
There's a big history.
A lot of people, just it's the lifestyle and also, the age of most of my friends and that people in their 50s who, I indulged cheesy foods and drink and so forth. But the point is, this was really my wake up call to get my act together in terms of diet, in terms of, and I've been lectured endlessly, right? Every time I have an annual physical, you really should eat better and more vegetables and less, of this and more of that. And yeah. And they know you're not going to do it, right? Until something really pushes you to the point where you're on death's door, you get a big scare. And I had a number of friends who would say, look, we're not going to lecture you, but we hope that the same way we took it seriously when something like this happens, that you take this as your wake-up call. Mm-hmm. It was not a heart attack. It was what they deduced. The most they can tell is that it was a panic attack or an anxiety attack, which go figure, because of all the stresses of like extracting ourselves from mainland China.
I'm surprised
and
I haven't been having them.
I just have that one finally.
Understandable reaction.
So the EKG that I did yesterday, the treadmill, the woman who was running it, she's like a woman who's been doing this for like 30 years, right? So she's looking at it, even though it hasn't gone to the doctor for the official evaluation yet. She knows whether or not it's looking good, right? And she's like, oh,
she can tell. Not she bad. Can see how you're doing the things and how
she gave me a thumbs up. She's like, like I'm not gonna die in the immediate term, hopefully. And I asked her, I said, has anybody ever flown off of this thing? Well, because they speed it up, right?
Right.
And Wen was with me because she was translating, and she didn't want to translate a stupid question, but she did. And the woman said, "Oh yeah, every now and then somebody goes
it's not a stupid question. It's a totally understandable question. Yeah, that's awesome."
So anyway, to take it out of chucklehead mode back into something more serious, I decided for my children's sake, really, I got to stop screwing around with taking liberties. I've been lucky that I come from good genetic stock. My parents have always looked 10, 15 years younger.
They don't look their age from the photos.
Than they are and have been hale and hearty. They got stuff popping up. They're both 80 now, so stuff is starting to happen. But my God, for that age, they're doing really well. And I've been blessed with inheriting that, but I've been cursed with not respecting it, I guess you could say. Okay. Taking liberties with my health and just, abusing myself, basically. Indulging myself in ways that I should probably stop doing in my 50s and make sure that I'm around in my 80s and 90s for Claire, for Emma, for Wen. So that really inspired me to think about my life philosophy, not just from a medical or a dietary standpoint, but just philosophical. Like, all this stuff is going on. It's really easy to get in reactive mode, where you're just being buffeted by the winds of change and circumstances, and really to sit down and think. Like you talked about people taking time to deal with the reckoning of what's going on and orient themselves, and then think about how to transform. What's my life philosophy? And I was listening to a podcast where somebody was saying, most people don't actually, they think they have one. Oh, I have a life philosophy. Well, what is it? And it's like, good question. Like to really think about it and then physically write it down.
That's a key step. The writing of the thing is very important.
Exactly. Putting it down in black and white or blue and white or whatever color pen you're using, and really commit yourself to, does that look right? Does that feel right? Yeah. And so for me, I spent 2 days thinking about it, just as I was taking the kids to school, when I was just pondering it, and then finally started writing it down on the second day. And from morning to night, went through a bunch of scratch. I probably should have saved them, but scratch, and all that, too wordy, too whatever. Trying to have it be as succinct as possible, but also as encompassing and as transformative as possible.
Yeah, and I think
so. I'm gonna tell you what it is.
I'm not gonna just ruin your punchline. I'll just say that I think you nailed it. Because you've seen it. I shared it for the listeners, the viewers. I shared this with Brendan, and part of that was just to see, hey, not to get approval, but just, hey, what do you think of this? How's this tracking? I showed it to Wen. And I want to make the point, because people who know me, when they hear this, they'll start laughing when they hear these, because these are aspirational. These are things I aspire to. Hashtag goals. Yes.
Some of them I've gotten better traction at in my life than others. But what it is it came down to a 3-part, 6-word philosophy. Or mission statement, if you will. So the first one is to embrace life, and then to seek balance, and then to share experience. So embrace life, seek balance, share experience. And
I like
thank
that.
you.
Doing a little round of applause for the audio-only listeners.
In terms of that 3-part philosophy, embracing life is something that I think I've made a good effort at. I'm a yes and kind of guy, and putting myself in situations and scenarios in environments that challenge me, that enrich me, is something I think I've been. I still have more work to do, but I've made a fair attempt at that. Sharing experience. I'm not trying to be like a mansplainer or the great white, hope of China with this or that, but in the course of my life professionally, I've tried to, either through official teaching or through seminars or just casual conversations, to share what I've learned, to share what I still question with other people, and also now with my children, to help just share, how the world works, how we can look at things, and also, quite frankly, to learn from their experience. I mean, they're sharing their experience with me as well. The middle one is the one that makes people laugh, is when I talk about seeking balance, because I am the most unbalanced dude. I admit it. My emotions swing around. My weight oscillates. I really tend to. Yeah, I talk too much.
I'm keeping my mouth shut here, so I'm just gonna let you lay it out for everybody.
That's the one that's more aspirational, the middle one, about seeking balance, and really in terms of being more meditative, less reactive, not cutting out the things I like to do or eat or drink, but cutting down and balancing with things that are better for me, for the sake of my family, myself. Right. That's now that I have that written down, and this may change. It's good to every now and then take a look at it to remind yourself to stay on target, but also to evolve that target. You talk about the orientation and the transformation. As I transform, hopefully, I know that I will need to revise, just like you would for an organization. You revise your mission statement for where you are now, right? And you hopefully are evolving. It's an evolution as opposed to a devolution. But it's at least a vector that I feel comfortable with, and I feel gives me a sense of discipline that I need to deal with the unexpected stuff, to deal with the capriciousness of life that seems to have ratcheted up for all of us in 2020.
Well, I feel all of that, and I could easily just talk to you and react to everything you said, frankly, because I can relate to, a lot of these things from my own way. I had bad anxiety as a kid for reasons that have been covered extensively elsewhere, and in my late teens and in my early 20s, I started having what I thought were heart attacks, and turns out it was panic attacks, panic anxiety attacks, and without getting into a tangent about all that, just that's part of why I embraced, philosophy, Eastern and Western, and meditation and other things like that, starting at a relatively young age, and have come and gone with that. But in my early 30s to now, basically the last 20 years. Things like that have been a really, forefront of my thinking and consciousness, and I'm a deeply flawed human, like I guess all of us, and so I haven't always practiced what I internally preached, or what I knew was the case, and that leads me into my part of this, which is that among the transformations, I appreciate the you mentioned the weight, and this is a funny one because, again, for people who don't know the journey, basically 7 months ago, 2 days ago was 7 months exactly when I just changed my lifestyle and my diet and everything as a long-term commitment. Keto and intermittent fasting, and people are bored to hear about all that, so I don't want to talk about all of that specifically. It doesn't matter. But the point is that it's a commitment, and the interesting thing is now, again, if there'll be photos that accompany the audio, I guess, or social posts, and if you're watching on video, you can see me. And I have lost. I had gotten unbelievably heavy for me. I'm a little under 5'11", basically. I'm 5'11" if I stand up really straight. I had gotten up to 305 pounds, and as of this morning, I'm up 185.
Wow.
So I'm 120 pounds down in 7 months.
Dude, we're the same weight now.
Oh, that's wild. Well, and I'm not going to stand up and show you, but like if you see me, my mom actually was nice enough to get me some new clothes from Belk so that I had shirts that fit me. And this is like an athletic shirt, but it's one of the only things I have that fits. Yeah. But you see, I understand I look pretty skinny, and I look skinny until basically my belly button. And then the equivalent amount below the belt, like that
Yeah.
section is to where the spare tire is. I still have about 20 pounds to go.
Yeah.
Which is
Myself as well,
wild.
actually.
That means that it's just unbelievable to me to realize that, wow, I might, like, 165 might be the non-fat version of me. And then I'm gonna focus back into more like muscle. I'm not gonna try to get big again, but like muscle building
Right.
exercises. But
Tone
anyway,
and yeah.
that's all I want to talk about. That I just want to say that the interesting thing is you hear this phrase a lot with people that have like a gender or other kind of an identity crisis, or they're going through a transformation. And when they finally make certain decisions or come to terms with something, they say something like, the outside finally matches the inside.
Yeah.
And what's funny is if you see me now, I mean, I walked around for longer than I care to admit, basically looking like the bass player from like a classic Southern rock band. I look like the bass player in Molly Hatchet. No offense to those guys. They're all amazing players, but GQ's not holding the cover for those guys next month. So I've kind of gone from looking like a bass player in a Southern rock band to possibly the lead singer in like an aging Swedish death metal band.
Yeah.
I'm kind of going more like, I'm leaning toward more like Skinny Wizard.
Yes.
Like my hair's
Wizard.
long, getting skinny. I've still got a little go.
That could be your avatar name.
But yeah, so like, singer in like some legendary Swedish death metal band.
That'd be a good death metal band name, Skinny Wizard, I think. Unless it's already
Skinny
taken.
Wizard. Skinny Wizard. Well, I like that.
That's
I wish I was more of a wizard.
Basically.
I wish I was more of a wizard. But so for me, here's the reveal. Virtual drum roll. So I'm going to be making a lot of changes in what I do in terms of output. And I'll talk about what I'm going to focus on. First, I'm going to talk about what I'm changing or ending. So this is the last episode of this show. This is the last episode of If I Knew You Better. I'm going to cross-post on Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom. That's been retired on and off and come back to life a few times. I Frankensteined it. But this is the last episode of this show. And I'm going to want to do something else in the future. It's going to be a focus on video. I know very little right now, but what I do know is that it'll be sort of more like this we're doing here. It'll be more of this, and it might actually involve a few guests. So it's like me in a panel or a round table, really, where I'm technically hosting, but we're all talking. Cross-talking is probably the way that's the kind of thing I want. I don't want it to be like talking over each other, but like I think having three points of view or 4 points of view in the room, virtual or otherwise. I mean,
good dynamic.
That can work. It's just a matter. It's like a recipe. It's like the right ingredients and such, and understand right ingredients, right recipe, and we're all making the same stew, But but whatever it's going to be, I'm going to be putting stuff on YouTube more, and once we can get back out and do work, I streamlined this YouTube channel I've had since 2006. I had another one when they launched in 2005 that is still around, but I don't post anything to it. But I'm going to have playlists within my channel that focus on, like, when we can go make the Paris movie, there'll be one that's about France in that movie. And there'll be different. There's like one that'll be just about probably Paris museums is probably its own playlist, because I'm going to be a nut in those places when I can, again, to go see stuff. And there'll be a thing that's like behind the scenes of the movie. And then probably like this thing that's like the official behind the scenes. So like there'll be a thing that's fly on the wall, and then probably like things that, of course, we'll have a crew shooting that kind of stuff besides like on my iPhone. But so I'm going to start sharing this fun stuff. Once I can get out in the world and do that fun stuff again, I'm going to share it with people. And I think YouTube's the best place to put it. So all my stuff like this, if I do podcasts, there's going to be a video component as well. And the podcast to be available in all the usual places, Right. But it'll just be the audio portion, and the whole thing with the video is going to be right there on YouTube. How
it's a
China
good supplement
works.
in terms of seeing people.
Yeah, exactly. And the next thing to say is that How China Works, which, I had the original idea, had the original concept, co-created it with Ying Lee, who became my awesome partner on that in every way, from co-hosting, co-producing. But, as my purview moves away from China, as I am physically moved away, and as the things I'm doing, like all of my development's been offshore the last 2 years anyway. It's all been Paris or New Zealand or the US, and Canada to a small degree. There's nothing cooking there now, really. But so I'm trying to move away from, moving forward. I know how China has worked heretofore to a degree,
Right.
And I know, an overview of a lot of interesting things, and I have the experience of my time in and things I've learned secondhand from friends and such. But the bottom line is that that's not my focus. It was never intended to be the final destination for me. When I moved to China 5 years ago, 5 years minus a month at this point.
This last
a month and a half, yeah. When I moved to China 4 years ago, the 5-year plan was that by year 5, I'm living in New Zealand. Now, the COVID variant, the COVID curveball that we've all had, obviously those plans can kind of go out that window, but that is still the goal. And there's an exception to this possibly, but I want to finish the thought on changes about shows. So with how China works, we have had some 2-person interviews. Like we've had some man, woman interviewing a guest. We've had some shows that are some of the best ones where it's the two of us together. And then like with anything, occasionally you have one where we both have, and we would do a lot of work beforehand, get on the same page, etc. But, sometimes there's a guest who's just better suited to talk to really her. And my stuff's almost like color commentary, but in a way it doesn't add. And the reverse is true probably to a lesser extent, but the reverse has been true too. Yeah. So, and given all these givens, and, she is Chinese, she's living in China, she intends to, live in China moving forward, and she'll travel the world when that's a thing again. But, I imagine she'll base there for a while. You'd have to talk to her to get her take on that. So hi, Ying Ying, please let everybody know what you think. When should we go? But we talked about this. And so moving forward, I don't know how soon we would switch the artwork, because I did co-create it. I'm still going to edit it, still produce it, still do all the mechanics behind the scenes of posting and all this stuff. But she's going to be taking over completely. She's already been leading it really the last better part of a year, because I was gone last year doing movie stuff. But she's going to take over, officially take over, where it's her voice. And I think this is important, and I'll pop up and be a guest sometimes, probably, I certainly will check in. But I want it to be her voice now. And I'll say this, it's even possible that she wants to do a rebrand herself. I think for now, this is the plan we're going with. So, I know enough to say what I'm saying right now along those lines.
It'll be interesting to see, because of course the world is going through a reboot. A reset button is being hit globally, and definitely in China there's a reset being hit. And I won't go into the weeds on this at all, but as I mentioned earlier in this podcast about how countries like the U.S., like China, are in some ways using the virus for certain political, social, economic purposes, both internal and external. How China works, what constitutes China working, and how foreigners may or may not be involved, is going to change radically, I believe. And so I think that in many ways that could be more relevant than ever to have that kind of a show, but it needs to be fundamentally different than it was before, I think, because now China and the world is fundamentally different than it was before.
Very well said, and you saved me from saying it. That's what I was
cool,
because that's kind of what I was going. No, I was gonna go in that direction, and now you didn't steal my thunder. You did a nice job of saying that. Thank you. So that is kind of the idea, is I'm not there, and my engagements are not China specific engagements moving forward. So I'm sure I'll have some. Hopefully I'll have some distance things. I've got tons of friends, colleagues. I'm spending a lot of time. I've got a lot emotionally invested, financially, personally, professionally, a ton of investment.
Same here, man.
Just you more than me. So that's what I can relate your situation to myself, and then just explode it because of the family and the longer time, and you're married. It's my world in a big way. But I'm in this process of, the transformation is relating to this idea that, the podcast that I created, certain ideas, certain goals, but I've changed so much, and not just, Molly Hatchet to, Swedish death metal singer. But, the way I basically look now, if you ever been confused about my sense of humor before, I mean, in my brain, I always kind of look like this. I was a rock and roll guy from the beginning, interested in philosophy and strange subjects and such. And I want to honor that. And in the context of doing a China related thing, there's not a lot of room for a lot of that. And so it just is what it is, because if somebody's tuning in how China works, they don't want to hear my exegesis on how I came to some, philosophical thing. And probably the average person didn't want to hear that either. But my point is, it definitely doesn't fit on my current wheelhouse. So actually what's funny is the thing that I'm most sort of slightly regretful about is that I'll be leaving behind some of the art and work of other people who contributed to those shows, having even their signature. Part of it is the super cool artwork, I've got to say, from my friend Ronald Paredes. I've got to name check a few people who really helped make these shows happen and supported it and launched it. But Ronald has done the artwork on all my endeavors recently. He's even done the artwork. I realize my phone's not handy, or I'd try to hold up to the camera and show you the logo for Susie's new company. Actually, it's probably better because she hasn't officially launched it. I shouldn't say, but Susie's got a new business that she's launched on Taobao, and I'm a consultant. So Ronald Paredes, amazing artist and designer, and he came up in advertising as well, and he's done the artwork on these shows. And my friend Carl King, amazing composer, he's a director, like rock music, progressive rock musician, kind of the. Sort of in the Zappa school, and he's friends with Dweezil and works with Dweezil and all these people. He's in that orbit of the ultimate kind of progressive rock folk, are people who, he
Joe's
knows
Garage
and works with. And Carl composed the theme songs for the theme music and the bumpers, the in and out, the interstitials and all that. Carl did the music package for all my podcasts, and for that, so that was like a rock-oriented anthemic thing for Big Fish, and then it was a thing that was much more John Williams for this show, and when How China Works started in between the two shows, I first used the Big Fish music, which was a lot of fun, and then when I started this podcast to do a less China-specific global version of Big Fish was really the idea. That was the only differentiator. But then he did this John Williams-esque score, and I liked it so much that we started using it for How China Works, because it was like a little bit more of a classy pants kind of thing. It felt like a little bit more of like the right, because we've had like diplomats and ambassadors, and we've had that kind of guest. I've had some of those on these shows, but How China Works is heavy on that show, on that kind of a guest. Who you might want to play as something kind of robust and profound and vaguely classical. And so Carl King and Ron Paredes going all the way back to the beginning of all this stuff. And so thank you to those guys. And, I've had, you're the most frequent flyer, you're the most common guest of all of these things, outside of course, Inging and I co-hosting a show together, but you're the most frequent guest that I've had on anything.
I don't know how you put up with me for this long, really.
One day science may have an answer to that. I think like attracts like. I think you find people who are close enough to you in a lot of ways. And I know that was rhetorical. Part of my superpower is answering rhetorical questions. That's one of my special skills in my resume.
Yeah, stating the obvious is also my superpower. So.
Nice. So for me, focus-wise, in the meantime. So I'm ending these things and removing myself while still helping produce How China Works when Inging has things to put out and managing that. But I don't know who I'm going to be when we come out of all this. I don't know. I don't know where we'll be.
That's exciting. I
don't know physically where I'll be. So moving forward, while I'm figuring out, basically while I'm getting a handle on who I'm going to be, that's when I'm going to figure out what I want to do next. And I'm not going to rush it. I don't have a deadline or a timeline for that. In the meantime, A lot of these things I talked about during Reckoning, the top of this show, almost an hour and a half ago. Issues with what I want to do with my life, the rest of my life. My dad, what the passing of that means. This China adventure that I've had. The massive shared experience of what we're all dealing with, the pandemic around the world in different ways. Will deal with, etc. All of these things considered, I am really streamlining all my creative efforts into 2 specific tracks. The one track is continuing all the movie stuff, and we don't do predictions on this show anywhere. For a while now, we don't do any predictions, but continuing to chug along, have got the contingency of the contingency of the contingency plan, because the way we're in as good a shape as we can be, frankly, at this point.
Right, given the circumstances.
Given the circumstances, we're in a good place. I feel good about our Paris movie to shoot sometime later next year, most likely. Given the timing of the pandemic and such, we'll see. That's the variable. But the other thing is my TV show. And we're not going to say the title, but it's, the goal is to get this show in front of Netflix, HBO, Showtime, Amazon, in that order, are like the ideal places for it to go. 1 hour drama, geopolitical thriller, international finance, and Hollywood. And China is like a sort of a character in the background. It's not about China, but that's a character, and a theme that's dealt with by other people. It's set in LA, basically. But this show is like everything. It's the thing that I've been needing to write and trying to write and building up to write for 30-odd years. And it's kind of everything I want to talk about, or that other people are talking about, that's in the cultural conversation, that's all relevant and related, that I want to put out there. And you've been nice enough to be a great advisor on this and give notes along the way, and your encouragement when it got to that almost done, when it was, you could see the finish line. I wasn't quite there, but it's like you could see it's slightly blurry, but there it is, and your help. And that was, so thank you again for all of that, because it really was great notes. And, that encouragement, like I said, has meant a lot. And I've been lucky that it's been met with a similar, really pretty universally good feedback, and enough kind of exceptional feedback that just, if nothing happened, that's not going to make me feel okay. But it's enough that I feel like, okay, if the universe wants this thing to happen, it'll happen. Or not, I haven't had anybody go, "What is this piece of crap?"
Your ability, right? That you wrote something that really speaks to people. Again, my general reaction after I read it was like, "Damn, I wish I wrote this."
I like that.
Thank you. If nothing else, it's like you really got some chops, and I know that you wanted to go somewhere, of course, but the fact that you're capable of producing something like that, of creating something like that, is pretty remarkable.
Thank you very much. It means a lot, and I specifically told Kevin in the pregame, don't butter my biscuit too much if I talk about the show, so I appreciate that. And
I don't want to avoid buttering your biscuit when it deserves.
I like butter, and I can't eat biscuits unless they're some kind of keto flour ungodly concoction right now. But some of those are probably pretty good. But I'm going to be focusing on this, and this is a fun thing for me. This will not be public, but we're recording this Monday. The audio will be out Tuesday, my time. The video is probably out later in the week, because I'm going to make it pretty, a little color correction, work on the sound. Well,
you're going to have a lot of work
these
to do
video angles. Yeah, but it's the last one, so I'm going to try to make it spiffy. But the audio will be out. If you're listening to this the day it drops, then that's a Tuesday, U.S. time, and Wednesday night, U.S. time, L.A. time, I'm going to get to do a virtual table read, and it's not for public consumption. It's private. I'm going to record it.
Awesome.
Worst cases, it's just for me to get to hear the words performed by talent. In this case, like talented actors across the board. I got so many. I thought I might just get sort of like recent grad, upcoming actors, basically people who kind of needed to meet more people. Frankly, I was thinking win-win. ask people to help me. There's no budget. So, but get people who are good and game, and that, hey, it'd be a fun thing to do, creative exercise. But I started with a few close friends who are basically a lot more established. So I've got some really talented actors, a lot of whom have like are recognizable, like known, a lot of known faces and a few known names. And it's private. I mean, I'll see if I can convince everybody to let's do like a Zoom selfie, everybody staring at the camera, and I do a screenshot. I'll see if I can post it on socials, but it's kind of a record. I mean, my hope is that, like I said, worst case is it's useful for me. Best case, because we're going to record it, I'll save it. You actually said this to me on the pregame call. You said something like, hey, maybe it's like a behind the scenes for when you make the show. It started here.
Yep.
And I
The
love
making
that
of.
idea. I'm going to hold that idea, Kevin. I'm going to give you credit
Cool.
for being the first to. I mean, I know I thought
Not a particularly
I
brilliant
did
idea,
think it, but you're the first person not in my head who said it. So
Cool.
I appreciate
Happy
it.
to help.
Let me ask you, do you have any closing thoughts for this before I do my little Paul Harvey jazz at the end and wrap us up? Last chance, Kevin. Last chance to talk on this podcast. All right.
On a practical point, coming out of the philosophy of embracing life and seeking balance and sharing experience, et cetera. Then from a practical standpoint, much like you outlined yourself, how you're trying to focus on these creative streams and not be too scattered or redirect yourself, pivot.
Yeah.
Let's say. I wrote down also for 2020, for 2021, what are my goals? And of course, this could change. It probably will change. But I want to wrap up the independent projects that I'm currently working on developing. Just get those to a point where the children's book is done. The sample that I'm doing for the graphic novel, the sci-fi graphic novel, is submitted. The screenplay that we're working on is translated into English and polished. And then I say, okay, those have reached a point at which they're in other people's hands. And those people are doing with those things what they will or maybe won't. Yeah. But then I'm focusing on aligning myself more closely with an existing company here in Taipei. Animation, visual effects, otherwise, bringing what I can to the table for that. Leveraging on what they already have, but then trying to maybe bring more business here to Taiwan. But then also really getting going with my AI startup. So I have this AI, I've talked about this a little bit on past shows, a startup related to AI characters and AI entertainment, avatars and so forth, AI assistants and agents. So these can be for business, for education, for entertainment, what have you. And I think that there's really, there is, of course, in mainland China, there's a pretty strong AI ecosystem. But that, I'm not privy to that landscape anymore. So I'm redirecting that here, where there's a pretty strong base as well, not as big, not as vast, of course, as in the mainland, but still something that can be leveraged upon. So that, of course, is more blue sky. So that's something that I'm researching now. I'm meeting people, and I think it'll be something that doesn't come to fruition until sometime next year, let's say. But in all of that, the uncertainty of that, I had a friend recently in mainland China who has kids and was like, oh my God, like how do you guys deal with uncertainty? Because she and her family are dealing with their own forms of uncertainty and they know what Wen and myself and our kids are going through. Right. How do you deal with it? And I really think this is part of embracing life. You embrace it. And people talk about embracing uncertainty and give a lot of lip service to it. But this coronavirus pandemic has really thrown the world for a loop, and people have been handling it in different ways. And going back to your comment about stasis equaling death, the insidious part about that is you don't really know when you're in stasis. You think you're moving and grooving, right? And you got stuff going on. Hey, I'm working on this and everything's fine, but you don't really see how stuck you are, right? Even if you're independent, doesn't matter if you're independent or working for somebody else or what have you, you may be more stuck than you realize. And this virus coming and just kind of shaking the bottle, right? And forcing people to react to it, to reflect on it, and to reorient. It by virtue of just the disruptive nature, forces you out of that stasis. And into the reckoning that hopefully does bring you to, the transformation that you're talking about. And of course, death is waiting for all of us eventually, but hopefully later than sooner. So,
Yes,
and
hopefully.
just there are different forms of death. There are people who are dead right now, even though they're still walking the earth alive. Their dreams are dead. Their
Yeah.
abilities are dead. Their point of view is dead. Their empathy is dead, right? That's the kind of death we want to avoid. The ultimate passing on to whatever's next awaits all of us. But if we can avoid being dead while we're alive, I think that's the key to having, the best existence we could hope for.
That is a beautifully put thought. You reminded me there was something that I said, something I wrote. I have a notebook where I write random lines. I mean, thoughts that just some random thing that I'm like, that could be an interesting line in a character's mouth. And then I look at this crazy because of my weird interests. I look at this. Wow, it's like, it's hard to imagine. This is not one character. There's a lot of characters there. It's part of why I wrote a TV pilot. But but I wrote a line that was in a period of reflection about over-identification with the self and the ego, and I was in that rabbit hole for people who can relate to this on a more than the obvious level. But I wrote this line that you reminded me of, which was now sure would be a great time for an ego death.
Yeah.
And I remember that funny little. I don't have a character whose mouth. It's not in my TV thing. I don't have anybody currently in a project where that line comes flying out of their mouth. But I'm curious who that weirdo is. Maybe on a future project, maybe I'll figure out that guy or gal that says things like that in a way that's not tried and that's funny and impactful.
Right,
or whatever,
and that works into that. Could even be something I could see a character reading as a quote, like. Here's something
that would be the way to work it in. If I can't put it in somebody's mouth, if I can't justify sticking it in somebody's mouth, I could have somebody read it. If you needed that in the air, but Kevin, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to hold on after you say goodbye while I do a little wrap up here. But thank you so much, man. This has been an awesome journey with you. Fretful Laowai Endgame indeed, brother.
It's bittersweet, man. I mean, I appreciate meeting you in the first place years ago and the friendship that we formed very quickly and kept cultivating throughout, not only the podcast, but just getting together. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again, man. I'm going to catch you on the flip side for sure.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate it. Give my best to win Emma and Claire.
I will.
And I'm going to keep this wrap up short. Thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention to this stuff. And to whatever degree you've discovered somebody whose point of view you found useful, or something that they said or that they've been involved in and shared a link, or something I happened to say that you found useful or interesting, or just, entertained you past the time, I'm super grateful for all of that. Again, I just want to thank everyone who's been part of this, all the previous guests, my friends. Got to give Susie the top credit for putting up with this for the last few years. He's thoroughly enjoyed it. But the encouragement of people like Kevin and Susie, my girlfriend, and this huge group of people who, between the three shows, I mean, the three shows, it's not huge numbers, but between the three shows, there are close to 100,000 downloads of the three podcasts that I created and host or co-hosted. So not huge numbers, Joe Rogan gets millions in an instant when he puts up an episode, but we've all heard of Joe Rogan, and other than you, everybody hasn't heard of me. So I do hope that you go back to the archives. The shows will be online forever. The podcasts, If I Knew You Better, Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, those archives will be up forever. And How China Works, the archives of that will be up forever, and Ying will, in the interim, continue that. She may also end up doing a new thing. If she wants to continue doing that forever, it's got my blessing and my involvement, and I'm happy either way. But I really appreciate it. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably already turned it off because this is where people jump to the next video of like cats playing with yarn or something. But if you're still there, please like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to be notified when I post something. I don't post a bunch of spam. if you enjoyed this, you'd like probably most other stuff that I post. So, again, I'm Brendan Davis. Bottom of my heart, thank you to everybody who gave a listen to anything I've done or been part of the last few years. It really means a lot. It helped keep my brains inside my head during some hard times. It really did, to be able to talk to people like Kevin Geiger. So I want to say thank you. I'll see y'all soon.